Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahawashi, Bahasham, Barakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video. And in this video, I'll just be going through a few bits of information just to further document that we truly are living, in the last seconds of the biblical Edomites, or these so-called white people's rulership globally, all across the planet. You've got these nations that have been, abused by the so-called Western world for the last couple of 100 years, bucking up to them, kicking them out of their country and saying, we're going to take our own path. And, what this is ultimately going to end in is you Edomites, fully being taken out of power, this age of the rulership of the heathen nations coming to an end, and then you, along with these other heathens, going into slavery in the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of Israel, ruled by the true children of Israel, who are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. As it says in 2 Esdras chapter 6 around verse 9, for Esau is the end of the world or age, and Jacob is the beginning of it that cometh. And hey, we are quickly coming into the age of Jacob's rulership. But the first bit of information I'll be going into is on Lena Petrova's YouTube channel, and it's titled Breaking Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger form a Sahel confederation to fight Western neocolonialism. And those are all, most of them are West African countries. And as we'll see in this clip, they're saying we're going to take our own path. We're going to get out from under years of Western colonization, chiefly from the French. And, again, this is all just further signs of Esau Edom being taken out of power. But before we get into that clip, the first precepts I'm going to be going to is in Obadiah chapter 1. I'm going to start at verse 1. And this whole book is dedicated to the humiliation and downfall of you Edomites. As the header reads, Edom will be humbled. The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord Yahweh concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from Yahweh, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. And hey, these nations are rising up against, these Edomites, chiefly in the Western world, as we're about to see in that clip. And, World War III is also a part of biblical prophecy as well. And what that's going to culminate into is America's enemies and her own allies shooting nuclear missiles onto her. Verse 2, behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. And that them being made small amongst the heathen goes into, their reputation across the planet being made low, which we clearly see with the so-called Western world. These Western European nations, the United States of America, Canada, Australia, etc., etc. As I've been saying, these so-called third world and second world nations, they're seeing you lose your grip on power. You're not that same old devil you were in the past. So now they're bucking up and, taking the fate of their countries into their own hands. They don't want democracy anymore. They don't want these Western ideals. And, a lot of these nations are looking towards the East with what? BRICS. And what's one of the major nations in BRICS? Russia, who, while they're also Edomites, the Most High is using them to gather the world, what? Against, the West, chiefly America. And that's all a part of biblical prophecy. But let's get back to this clip. And this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this video, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes. And I'm going to play about the majority of this video. So get your popcorn ready.
Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in. There's a very good saying, nothing brings a team together like a common enemy. Although I'm not a big fan of the word enemy, it is just too strong and way too categorical. The way I see it is nothing brings a team together like a common goal. Especially
But hey, enemy is the correct term to use. Nothing brings, people together like a common enemy. In this case, these French Edomites. Again, arise ye, and let us rise up against her. I have made thee small amongst the heathen, thou art greatly despised.
if that goal revolves around decolonization and stopping the exploitation of your country and its people by the same actors who have been in the business of taking advantage of others for centuries. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are establishing closer ties and uniting. On July the 6th, the three countries announced that they're forming a brand new union, a confederation of Africa's Sahel region. The three military leaders met during a summit in the capital of Niger and signed a confederation treaty that is focused on two things, on defense and on economic cooperation. The agenda also included border security issues, the fight against terrorism, and economic development. Primarily, under this new agreement, the states will create an investment bank and a stabilization fund. Additionally, they agreed to develop.
And on a quick side note, you got a lot of Israelites, chiefly of the southern kingdom, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi in the west coast of Africa. Hey, and we've had Israelites over in the West Coast comment on our videos before, telling us that they're listening. Hey, this word is truly gone to the ends of the earth. And as it says in Matthew chapter 24, verse 14, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, chiefly through the unicorn or the internet, and then shall the end come. And hey, seeing all these prophecies that Esau's, fall in the process of taking place lets us know exactly where we're at.
Further cooperation in agriculture, in energy, and in transportation. The three states are even discussing establishing a new Sahelian currency to replace the French franc. Imagine that. As you may recall, France actually created the CFA franc to support their continued exports from the Sahel region. The CFA franc, if you're not too familiar with this, the CFA franc is a French acronym, and when you translate it,
USDC is money with all the benefits of the open internet, so it moves fast, across borders.
From French to English, the CFA actually stands for African Financial Community.
Questo si chiama Franco CFA.
Now, this lady, I believe she's speaking in Italian, so I'll try to read the main subtitles with importance.
È la moneta coloniale.
The CFA franc, it is the colonial currency that France prints for 14 African nations.
Che la Francia stampa per 14 nazioni africane, alla quale applica.
To which it applies seigniorage, and by virtue of which it exploits the resources of these nations.
Alle quali applica il signoraggio e in forza delle quali sfrutta le risorse di questa nazione.
This is a child who works in a gold mine in Burkina Faso.
Questo è un bambino che lavora in una miniera d'oro in Burkina Faso. Il Burkina Faso è una delle
Burkina Faso is one of the world's poorest nations.
nazioni più povere del mondo. Per il Burkina Faso che ha
France prints colonial money for Burkina Faso, which has gold.
l'oro, la Francia stampa moneta coloniale. In cambio pretende che
In return, they demand that 50% of everything that Burkina Faso exports ends up in the coffers of the French treasury.
finiscano nelle casse del tesoro francese il 50% di tutto quello che il Burkina Faso esporta. L'oro che questo
The gold that this child goes down a tunnel to
bambino
extract
si infila in un cunicolo per tirare fuori finisce per lo
mostly ends up in the coffers of the French state.
più nelle casse dello Stato francese. Allora la soluzione non
So the solution is not to take the Africans and bring them to Europe.
è prendere gli africani e spostarli in Europa. La soluzione è
The
liberare
solution is to
l'Africa
free
da certi
Africa from
europei
certain
che la
Europeans who
sfruttano
exploit
e
it.
consentire a queste
Allow
persone
these
di
people
vivere
to
di
live
quello
off
che
what
hanno.
they have.
So the new union is an important
Habakkuk chapter 2 all day. This is Habakkuk chapter 2. I'm going to start at verse 4. Behold, his soul, which is lifted up, is not upright in him. Speaking of these Edomites, the biblical wicked, the border of wickedness in Malachi 1 verse 4, and the wicked whom the earth has been given into the hands of in Job chapter 9 verse 24. As it also says in Psalms 58 verse 3, the wicked are estranged from the womb. They go forth speaking lies as soon as they be born. And when you look at the history of these Edomites, especially during colonialization, what was all that? Lies, subterfuge, rape, robbery, and murder. We're bringing civilization to your country, but, that's really just, enhancing our countries while we drain your country of its natural resources and keep your people at third world status. But the just shall live by his faith. Speaking of the Israelites, chiefly the elect right now, who are living by their faith in believing in Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, and that these prophecies will come to their fulfillment. Yeah, also because he transgresseth by wine his different philosophies, democracy, feminism, capitalism, socialism, communism, all these isms came from the Edomites. We can't forget the alphabet, group beginning with LG, the list goes on and on. Yeah, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home. Just look at colonialization. As we just saw from that clip, that currency over in 14 African countries are what? Printed by France to give to those countries. Hey, what are the French doing in Africa? Why don't they just stay in Europe? But that's the case with all these different Edomite nations throughout their history. They go into these different countries. If the rulers don't want to play ball, they knock them off and set up puppets that allow them to rape that nation of its resources and, its people, literally, and of their future, who enlargeth his desire as hell and is as death and cannot be satisfied. Hey, these Edomites, they just want more and more and more. Just look at the elites. They've had the world on lock for the last 500 or so years, but that now they want to put a C-hip in you so that they can know all your purchases, everywhere you go, everything you do, and what? They want you to eat bugs and, not own anything. As K. Schwab said it best, you will own nothing and be happy. But gathereth unto him all nations and heapeth unto him all people. What does that sound like? NW0, which is exactly what that great RESET is, that fourth industrial revolution, getting everybody on this digital, cashless society grid. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, which is exactly what we're seeing in that first clip with these African nations telling, these French Edomites, hey, get out of our country. Look at what you've done to our people over the last hundreds of years. You come here, you set up your so-called civilization, but at the same time, what? All our goods and natural resources, you just send it back to your country and leave our country in the toilet. How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay or debts. And this whole Western world, chiefly the United States of America, is built off of debt, student loan debt, housing debt, etc., etc. Look up a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which dealt with a man who worked on behalf of American corporations, which the U.S. government had a hand in, and he would go to a lot of these third world countries like Africa or South America, and go to their leaders and say, look, we'll take care of you and your family. Just allow these corporations to come in and, build up the infrastructure. But, the thing is when those corporations came in and built up that infrastructure, since, the dollar was the world reserve currency, and, it still is the world reserve currency, though it's quickly losing its power. Since those countries' currencies couldn't compete with the power of the US dollar, they had to sell off assets into their country to those corporations, making them perpetual debt slaves. And to those leaders that didn't want to play ball with, the government or these corporations, then they would send in something called the jackals, which were assassins that would take out those leaders by planes crashing, cars exploding, anything you can think of. And if that didn't work, then they finally sent in something called the Leviathan Force, which was a nickname for the United States military. And these other America's not just exempt. These other European countries, like France, have gone into a lot of these third world countries, like in Africa, and what made them indebted to the French. Hell, they're not even using their own currency. They're using a French designated currency, which the French have control on and can do whatever they want to benefit them while keeping the native inhabitants of that country underneath their feet. Verse 7, shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be booties unto them? Because thou hast spoiled many nations through colonialization, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, of the city, and of all that dwell therein. And we're seeing that right now with what? These different nations starting to tell these Western Edomite powers to leave their country. And then, you've got a lot of, migrants going into Europe and taking shit up there, taking Edomite women, taking those government benefits and just wrecking those countries. But what this is ultimately talking about is in the kingdom of heaven, the remnant of those that survive World War III, these heathens that are going to be in slavery in the kingdom of heaven. While they're going to be slaves, they're still not going to be Edomites. And everybody's going to be gunning for you Edomites. You Edomites are going to be in the lowest case in the kingdom of heaven. Just like how in your setup, the children of Israel, especially, the so-called Negroes, so-called blacks, African Americans of the Southern Kingdom are the lowest of the low right now. And, at the top of that remnant of the people that are going to spoil thee are going to be the elect of the nation of Israel, that remnant that has come back to their power and are doing whatever they can to please him, to be saved from all these calamities of Jacob's trouble, which are quickly coming our way. But before we get back, again, shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee? These West African countries coming together to fight Western Edomite neocolonialism.
Step towards limiting Western influence on these countries, as well as limiting the export of raw materials to Western developed nations. Not only did the leadership of Burkina Faso, of Mali, and Niger made French and American military leave their territories, but also they are now taking active steps, as you can see, to regain control of their territories, to move away from Western so-called allies, and to collaborate regionally in supporting security and economic ties. These countries are determined to stop the West from profiteering from extreme inequality and exploitation of their natural resources.
Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, how long? Let's X some of this out to get some space.
As we know, Africa has been suffering from extreme lack of stability, from poverty, from human crises, refugee crises, from terrorism and wars, you name it. The new alliance is effectively an alternative to ECOWAS in a way, and hopefully it will help provide some stability to these three countries, both in terms of security and hopefully economically. As you may recall, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger actually withdrew from ECOWAS, which stands for Economic Community of West African States. They did that earlier this year after they were sanctioned following military coups d'etats in these states. The Sahel region, where these three countries are located, has opposed the French domination for years, for decades. All three states opposed the Western influence in ECOWAS, and they show no interest in returning to the bloc that is known for its close ties to France, for example, among other Western nations. Despite the fact that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are effectively under a military dictatorship, the main focus of these leaders is to stop the exploitation of their natural resources and therefore the people by Western powers. These three countries are among the poorest nations in the entire world, and they have been that way for decades. During the colonial times and up until now, effectively, Western countries extracted natural resources virtually for free and then shipped these valuable materials back home. These resources were then subsequently used to produce finished goods, which then were sold back to these poor nations, poor countries, as well as other countries around the world. And they were sold back at much higher costs, of course. Western nations did not really prioritize any type of investments into these countries that they exploited, other than the construction of facilities and transportation routes to move resources. Therefore, these African countries that are extremely resource-rich never truly had a chance to exist outside of that colonial reality that I just described.
That gathereth unto him all people and heapeth unto him all nations.
Leader of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, has been determined to get rid of any Western influence. This leaves the West guessing effectively. Are African raw material export bans a form of protectionism or self-determination? The Sahel is an important source of gold, uranium, manganese, and iron ore. After the 2020 coup, Mali's president created a new mining code which increased potential state ownership of new projects to 35% from 20%. After the 2021 coup in a neighboring country, the military began pressing international mining companies to invest more in national mining operations, introducing more demanding local content requirements, and pushing miners to refine their output locally. In Niger, they imposed a moratorium on all state export contracts with the intention of reviewing them to improve their commercial fairness, a provision which includes pegging prices of exported minerals to trading prices quoted on international exchanges. So we're seeing African countries either limit exports of raw materials, tell international countries, look, you need to build factories here and you need to refine our resources here locally, creating jobs in our countries, or they choose to increase prices of these raw materials globally. A recent article in Foreign Policy clarifies resentment of French neocolonialism is motivating a backlash against Paris across West Africa. This is clearly the driving force behind Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger forming stronger and stronger ties. Foreign Policy goes on to explain, the military president of Niger, Chani, has called for France to pay damages to longtime African client states like his for years of what he has likened to looting. In Burkina Faso, next door, another military leader, Ibrahim Traoré, has vowed never to allow his country to be dominated by Europeans again. Additionally, just several months ago, it was reported that 3 French diplomats were kicked out of the country over subversive activities in Burkina Faso. Of course, France denied that there was any wrongdoing on their part, and France said that these
I've made thee small amongst the heathen, thou art greatly despised. And this is another example just showing that Esau's losing his grip of power because, a couple of decades ago, none of these third world countries would have been kicking out Western diplomats from their country.
allegations were unfounded. You may ask, did the French and other European leaders know that they were exploiting countries and that it was absolutely evil to do that? Well, of course they did. For example, former French President Jacques Chirac said in an interview, "Don't forget one thing, and that is that a large portion of the money that we have in our purses comes from the exploitation of Africa over the centuries. So we need a little measure of good sense." I didn't say generosity, he said, but good sense and justice to render to Africans, I would say, what we took from them. This is necessary if we want to avoid the most severe turmoil and difficulty with all of the political consequences that this will bring in the near future.
Hey, shall not these suddenly rise up against thee, that shall vex thee, and make booties of thee? Thou hast spoiled many people, now shalt thou be spoiled.
Burkina Faso.
That's it with that clip. But, like I said earlier in the video, who are a lot of these nations, so-called third world and second world nations turning to as an alternative to the West, the East, with BRICS? And again, who's that head nation, that major nation making all these plays with the BRICS? Russia. This is an article from AlJazeera.com. Russia's African Lab, how Putin won over Burkina Faso after French adieu. Russia has been increasing its influence in Burkina Faso, where disillusionment with French politics has left a void. That's all we're going to read with that. Now I'm going to go to an article on understandingwar.org. Africa File, April 4th, 2024. Mali and Russia explore Mali's mineral wealth. Niger plays the field, the Kremlin's Red Sea ambitions in Eritrea. And remember, this was dealing with Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Key takeaways. Mali. The Malian junta is increasing cooperation with Russia to boost its gold, oil, gas, lithium, and uranium production to bolster its energy independence and boost state revenue. These economic projects benefits the Kremlin by securing access to a cut of the resources, which it can use to circumvent Western punitive measures, such as sanctions. Niger. Russia and Iran have been leading partners for the Nigerian junta since the junta took power in July 2023, and the junta has continued deepening ties with both since annulling defense cooperation with the United States in mid-March. The junta is simultaneously engaging with an array of long-standing Nigerian partners, including the People's Republic of China, Germany, Italy, and Turkey, to advance its economic and security interests. So again, Russia is a major player in allowing these nations to find an alternative to, the hegemony of the West. And that's all a part of biblical prophecy. This is Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to start at verse 2. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog. Speaking of Russia, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Like I just said, these Russians are Edomites as well, and they're going into slavery, and their power is going to be taken away. But the Most High is using them right now to fulfill prophecy. Verse 4, And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. The Most High putting those Russian Edomites back in that old confrontational Soviet Union spirit, which we can clearly see. And I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Russia's military mainly being gathered down into the Valley of Jehoshaphat in the so-called Middle East, really Western Asia, for the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And we can already see that Russia is bringing out their armed forces to get ready for this battle. Verse 5, Persia, which is the ancient name for Iran, Ethiopia, which is in Africa, and Libya with them, also in Africa, all of them with shield and helmet. And when you look up Russia's ties to those countries, just like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, Russia has economic and military ties with them. So what? Russia is being an alternative to these Western nations from the West. I think I might have said the West. He's being an alternative to these African nations from the West. Verse 6, Gomer, which is speaking of Turkey. And what do we read in that article on African File? That Russia, Iran, and Turkey are all building up relationships and alliances with these West African countries. And all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the North Quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company, or your allies that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. And again, Russia is being a guard unto these second and third world nations against, these Western powers. But let me see. I'll go to this first. This is my last bit of information on Sky News Australia, since we're dealing with France right now. Paris will burn. Chaos erupts in France as left-wing alliance predicted to win. So not only is France losing its external, influence in the world, but internally the country is in turmoil. And this is a case for a lot of these Western Edomite nations. And this is a fair use copyright disclaimer. I do not own any of the footage in this clip, nor do I stand to gain from it monetarily. It is simply for educational purposes.
This is what the victory rally for the new French government looked like, and as you could see in that footage, there are far more Palestinian flags being waved than French flags. In fact, there are hardly any French flags at all. It comes as Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party was defeated in the second round of the French parliamentary elections, and the country's left-wing alliance, the New Popular Front, looks set to win after exit polling indicated it would win the most seats. Now, this alliance didn't even exist a month ago, but four parties came together to keep the far right out of power. And it's promised to scrap immigration reforms and set up a rescues agency for undocumented migrants to facilitate visa applications.
And that's a major issue that those Western European nations are dealing right now with, the migrant issue. A lot of them refugees from a lot of these wars these Western countries have waged in their countries. What are they doing? Just like over here in America now, they're living off of government benefits. They're making their own little enclaves, which don't want anything to do with the native countries, politics, identity, or religion. And they're just not taking it. Hey, when the shoe's on the other foot, it doesn't feel good, does it, Esau? When people come into your country, your land, and tell you that everything you believed is not right. In this case, telling you that you're nothing but colonizers, racists, and what? The problem of the face of the earth, which is exactly what you are. This is Isaiah chapter 33, verse 1. Woe to thee that spoilest, such as Western colonialism, and thou was not spoiled, and dealest treacherously, and they dealt not treacherously with thee. Going into these African countries, which, those so-called Africans are Hamites. So to hell with them at the end of the day. But like I said a little earlier in the video, a lot of those so-called Africans in West Africa are Israelites. Hey, so you're exploiting our people. And dealest treacherously, and they dealt not treacherously with thee. Let's look at Africa. These Western powers came in, and instead of building factories and refining the material in those countries, they took those raw materials out of their country and refined it in those European countries, and then turned around and sold it back to those African countries at a uptick in price. And with their currencies not being able to have the same value as those Western European currencies, what are they left in? Perpetual debt, perpetual poverty. And then let's not forget the United States of America. When you European Edomites came here, and what you did to the Native Americans, you're living on stolen land. When thou shalt cease to spoil, thou shalt be spoiled. And when thou shalt make an end to deal treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee. And hey, this Edomite, in that same devil he was, hundreds of years ago, we can see his powers waning. It's looked at as a negative to be a so-called white man or a so-called white woman in their own countries. You've got these migrants coming in, and like I just said, they're living off of government benefits and making their own little communities where they want nothing to do with the native country. And it's only going to get worse from here on out, Esau.
Now, the world is watching and reacting to the results coming in. This is what is being posted on X. Good night, France. You've always been good at being rapidly conquered. Another person wrote, one thing about France is they never miss an opportunity to surrender their country, and enjoy your country while it lasts. Journalists and commentators.
When thou shalt cease to spoil, thou shalt be spoiled. When thou shalt cease to deal treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee. And another thing, look at these, identity politics and social justice causes. You've got a lot of those, organizations that push that have the elites, funding them to destabilize those countries. But you've got a lot of Edomites in those countries, so-called left-leaning, that look at the horrors of their forefathers and think, look, our history's bad. We need to, treat these people with respect. Yeah, let them into the country. They're just human beings too. But again, look what's happening. You're losing your country. You're losing your stolen identity. You're losing your rulership. Reverse colonization, so to speak.
Sharing vision from on the ground, where despite being the projected winners of the elections, many who belong to the far left are rioting in the streets. Podcast host Brianna Morella shared this clip and wrote, I'm fascinated by France's far left. If they lose, Paris will burn. If they win, Paris will burn.
Hey, Paris, you Western nations, and especially the United States of America, are going to burn regardless. Because again, we are living in the last seconds of your rulership. Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. Now I'm going to close it out in 2 Esdras chapter 9 in the Apocrypha. I'm going to start at verse 1. He answered me then and said, measure thou the time diligently in itself. And that's exactly what the men of the Lord are doing. Hey, we're looking at the news and reading the scriptures, and then filtering the news through the scriptures to prophesy to let you know what times we're currently living in. And when thou seest part of the signs past, which I have told thee before through these scriptures existing, for thousands of years, prophecies that were told hundreds and, thousands of years ago, they didn't take place back then, but now we're living in the time of them coming to their fulfillment. Then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made, to judge the people in it for the wickedness they've been committing, chiefly you Edomites, as well as the wicked of our people, who, while you have the prophets out here telling you who you are and what you can do to be saved from your power, you scoff at the men of the Lord and cast our words, really the words of the Lord, behind your back. And as it says in 2 Ezra chapter 9, and they shall know it after death by pain. Verse 3, therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes, which are happening damn near daily all across the planet, and uproars of the people in the world, which we're seeing in France right now, and which is going to come to the United States of America as well, then shalt thou well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning. For like as all that is made in the world hath a beginning and an end, and the end is manifest. Point blank, period. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites, the age of Esau, before our age begins. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time, Shalom.